They weren't just thieves, they were architects of fear. For years, two nameless shadows haunted America's financial underbelly. Men without mercy, orchestrating robberies so precise they felt less like crimes and more like stage plays soaked in dread. Their method was cold-blooded brilliance. Take the families of bank employees captive the night before a heist and use their lives as bargaining chips by morning. It was a scheme soaked in silence and steel. No alarms, no resistance, no loose ends. The FBI knew about them. In smoky briefings and whispered corridor exchanges, agents gave them nicknames: ghosts in tailored gloves, the gentlemen of midnight. Yet, despite years of pursuit, they left behind nothing but empty vaults and haunted witnesses. And then, in late December of 1982, everything changed. Steve Thompson wasn't a man accustomed to danger. A vice president at the Oklahoma City Bank, Thompson had built his life on trust and tenacity. That winter evening, he and his wife Ellen were returning home from a holiday party, tired and filled with the mundane calm of suburban comfort. The quiet of their driveway was broken by the soft hum of a car engine pulling in behind them. Then came the voice. "Mr. Thompson, FBI, we need a word." They stepped out from the shadows like actors hitting their mark, men dressed cleanly, but carrying menace in every movement. There was no badge, no warning, only steel gray eyes and the glint of something far more convincing than credentials. In the blink of a breath, the Thompsons were overpowered. Their garage became a trap, their home a prison. Steve tried reason. "You've got the wrong people," he said, his voice tight with disbelief. "May I see some identification?" Instead of a badge, a pistol spoke for them. And that was the end of questions. 3 intruders in total. 1 vanished into the darkness with the getaway car. 2 remained, silent, controlled, and terrifyingly efficient. They weren't just looking for cash. They wanted something far more dangerous: access. Vaults, combinations, schedules. Steve chose the only card he had left: cooperation. They grilled him about the bank's inner sanctum, testing his knowledge, measuring his fear. "Do you have the vault combination?" one asked, voice as calm as a surgeon. Thompson, thinking fast, offered a lie that might save lives. "No, only certain employees know that. We'll need to wait until morning." The ringleader, a man in a cheap wig but sharp as a scalpel, leaned in close. "If anyone so much as breathes wrong tomorrow, if a single alarm rings, we don't run, we retaliate. I'm not going back to prison." The night stretched endlessly. Inside their own home, the Thompsons sat bound in silence, breathing the thick air of dread, knowing dawn would decide everything. And at first light, the plan rolled forward like clockwork. Steve was forced into the driver's seat, a gunman seated quietly behind him. Ellen stayed behind, a silent guarantee that her husband wouldn't try anything heroic. The cold morning light washed the windshield as they rolled toward the Oklahoma City Bank. At precisely 9 a.m., the criminals put their plan into motion. One stayed outside, monitoring the building. Inside, Thompson was directed with surgical precision. Each employee who entered was silently evaluated: who had the code and who didn't. Behind the scenes, another thread was in motion. The FBI was still unaware of the unfolding scene, but that would soon change. And when they entered the picture, they wouldn't just follow leads. They would chase ghosts. And this time, they wouldn't stop until those ghosts bled names. The bank stood like any other. Bricks, glass, the usual lie of security. But on that morning, it was no longer a place of finance. It was a stage set for psychological warfare. Steve Thompson walked in first, dressed in his usual suit, but the weight on his shoulders was invisible and deadly. Behind him, one of the intruders watched every movement, calm and calculating. The message was unspoken but absolute: obey, and your wife lives. Employees began to arrive. A woman in a black floral dress stepped through the front doors, unaware she had just entered the eye of a storm. Another followed, a tall blonde staffer, who looked up just long enough to sense something was wrong, but not long enough to understand what. Each person who didn't have access to the vault was quietly directed to the restroom, polite instructions from men who didn't look like criminals, but carried themselves like apex predators. The rest were identified, one by one, and always the same question. Who knows the combination? Steve repeated his truth. He didn't know it, and he wasn't lying. But the criminals weren't interested in honesty. They were looking for leverage. And eventually, they found it. A nervous voice, one of the employees, murmured, "I know the code." That was enough. She was taken aside, flanked. Inside the cold, mechanical belly of the bank, the final barrier between the thieves and their prize stood tall and silent. "Don't play games," one of the gunmen growled. "Open it, now!" No one hesitated. Not with death in the room. The vault groaned open, its ancient hinges protesting like they could sense what was about to happen. And then, in less than half an hour, the fate of a city's worth of savings was scooped into canvas bags. Cash, jewelry, securities. Each note and gemstone a quiet scream of violated trust. "Got it?" one of them asked, eyes darting. "Yeah, we're good." But even with the money in hand, the job wasn't over. They forced Thompson and the bank manager to hand over the building's keys. Then, calmly, they corralled the hostages back together. "We'll be here for 5 more minutes, said the man in the wig, voice like ice under pressure. "Sit still. Stay quiet. Breathe wrong, and someone dies." Then they vanished, like fog retreating before a sunbeam. Minutes passed. Steve Thompson, still trembling, waited longer than necessary. Then he stood, listened, and opened the door. Silence. The robbers were gone. And just like that, the mask was off. He turned to the manager. "Call the FBI." The call went out, sharp and urgent. Patrol cars screened through the city. The Oklahoma City police arrived first, securing the bank, sweeping every corner. But this wasn't just a stick-up. This was federal now. The moment it was clear the bank was federally insured, jurisdiction passed to one agency equipped to handle predators of this caliber. The FBI entered. And everything changed. That night, under harsh lighting and tighter nerves, Steve and Ellen Thompson relived their nightmare for federal agents. Their voices cracked, but their details were precise. These weren't amateurs. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography. The Bureau listened carefully, and as their analysts cross-referenced notes and past case files, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. This wasn't the first time it had happened, and far more chilling, it wouldn't be the last. In the quiet hum of fluorescent-lit offices deep inside the Bureau's field headquarters, something began to stir. The pieces didn't just fall into place, they snapped into a pattern, one the FBI had seen before. Similar cases had dotted the map like scars, robberies with no alarms, no blood, just fear and precision. Each one began the same, a banker's home, a late-night knock, a terrified family taken as collateral. The next morning, the vaults would open without resistance, and the perpetrators, gone before anyone even whispered the word robbery. Special Agent Steve Chano, stationed in Phoenix and known for his obsessive casework and photographic memory, was among the first to connect the dots. One look at the Oklahoma City report, and his eyes narrowed. "I know these guys," he muttered, almost to himself. He wasn't guessing. Terry Connor and Joseph Dougherty, 2 names from the darker margins of Bureau files. Names whispered in training rooms, passed between agents like ghost stories that just might be true. The crimes weren't loud, they were clinical, flawless. Dougherty brought the heat, erratic, violent, unpredictable. But Connor? He was the architect, the planner, the one who made it all tick like a bomb with no wires showing. Chano didn't wait. He sent out a memo, urgent and clear. Match these names to every unsolved bank job from the last 5 years. Follow the blueprint. Where there's smoke, Connor and Dougherty have already set the fire. With Connor's prison record on file, agents pulled the thread back to its origin. Arizona, California. Each past hit matched their new one to the letter. Employees taken hostage in the dead of night. Vaults opened without a scream. Escape routes as clean as surgical cuts. Connor, it turned out, once called California home. If he was back on the run, the Bureau figured, he might be trying to disappear into a familiar coast. Their next move was surgical. Contact the FBI field office in Monterey. Special Agent Harlan Freyer, calm and calculating, took point. The Oklahoma team had provided a lead. Connor might be staying with an old flame in Pacific Grove, a coastal town where the fog came in thick and privacy was easy to buy. Surveillance was set up immediately. And then, a break. An out-of-state license plate showed up in her driveway. Oklahoma tags, clean car, registered to no one. Not under Connor's name, not under his alias. It was a ghost vehicle, like everything else he touched. Freyer's team knocked quietly. No alarms, no lights. The woman wasn't home, but the gardener was. One of the agents pulled him aside. "We're working a federal case. We need you to keep quiet." The gardener hesitated, then gave them the thread they needed. "She mentioned someone coming next week. Someone named Terry." That was enough. The Bureau didn't breathe. They waited. They bugged every car she used. GPS trackers, hidden wires. They didn't want a chase. They wanted a net. And when the day finally came, they followed her like ghosts through Pacific Grove. The cars moved through town, weaving between cypress trees and coastal bends. Then suddenly, radio silence. The tracking signal vanished. Every agent's jaw tightened. Connor was slipping away again. But then a stroke of luck. An aerial surveillance unit, watching from high above, picked up the ping again. It led to a quiet parking lot outside a restaurant. The car was parked, engine off, no sign of Connor. The team didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe too loudly. They just watched. Hours passed. Then a man appeared. Sharp suit, confident walk, and a face that matched every grainy surveillance photo they had on file. Terry Connor had arrived. Special Agent Freyer gave the signal. "This is it, take him." SWAT moved like a tidal wave. "FBI, hands where we can see them." Connor flinched, his hand darting toward his waistband. "Don't even think about it," barked one of the agents. For a heartbeat, time froze. Then slowly, deliberately, Connor raised his hands. The Bureau swarmed him, pressing him to the pavement like they'd been waiting years for the moment. His girlfriend, found inside the restaurant, was shocked into silence. Under questioning, she spilled nothing but insisted she knew nothing. Back at the Monterey field office, agents opened the trunk of Connor's car. Legally, it was fair game. He left it unlocked at the scene. What they found wasn't just evidence, it was confession in physical form. Nearly $4,000 in cash, every bill traced back to Oklahoma City, a large diamond, a receipt for 6 more. He hadn't just stolen, he was planning for the long run. Connor refused to speak, but his silence didn't matter. The FBI had his story written in serial numbers and glinting jewels. He was indicted, cuffed, and flown back to Oklahoma to face justice. But while one ghost was caught, the other was still out there. Dougherty had vanished, and somewhere out there, he was planning his next move. With Terry Connor behind bars, the Bureau's focus narrowed to a single name, Joseph Dougherty. If Connor was the architect, Dougherty was the wrecking ball. Reckless, impulsive, and always just a second away from bloodshed. And now, with his partner captured, he was a cornered animal. Dangerous, desperate, but not done. The FBI knew Dougherty wouldn't vanish quietly. Men like him don't go underground. They burrow into chaos. Which meant he'd strike again, and soon. That lead came not from an informant or a wiretap, but from a piece of paper. During a sweep of Connor's seized belongings, agents discovered a car registration slip tied to a vehicle bought in Reno, Nevada. The name on the form? Russell Anderson. A name the Bureau had never seen before. A name that didn't exist. It was an alias. They were certain. The address on the registration led them to a quiet residence in Santa Maria, California, a home with closed blinds and no movement. Freier's team called in tactical support. They surrounded the house, weapons drawn, breath shallow. The lead agent whispered, "Dougherty's probably armed." But when they made entry, the rooms were empty. Dougherty had slipped through their fingers again. They suspected Connor had warned him, sent word from a payphone or through an intermediary. One last favor between ghosts. Days passed, then weeks. The trail went cold. Until Phoenix, Thanksgiving night. While most of the city slept off turkey and football, Dougherty was already writing his next chapter in blood and fear. A high-ranking banker and his family were ambushed in their own home. The story was familiar. Too familiar. Bound hands, quiet threats, a whisper in the dark that promised death if anyone disobeyed. The next morning, before the sun had even touched the horizon, the banker was behind the wheel of his own car, a gun pressed against his ribs. "I have your wife and children," Dougherty told him. "Cooperate, or they die." By the time the FBI was alerted, Dougherty was already a shadow in the rearview mirror, $27,000 richer, and slipping through state lines. But this time he made a mistake. He chose the wrong city. Because Phoenix wasn't just a dot on the map, it was Agent Steve Chano's city, the same man who had first connected the Oklahoma job to Connor and Dougherty, the man who had spent years tracing their smoke trails through Bureau archive. When Chano saw the details, he didn't need a briefing. He leaned forward and said, "There's only one person who'd pull a job like this." Dougherty had returned, and this wasn't just another heist. It was a message, a provocation. He was daring the FBI to follow him, and they would, because now Dougherty was spiraling. He wasn't just robbing banks anymore. He was tearing through lives like a man with nothing left to lose. And if they didn't catch him soon, someone was going to pay that price in blood. The pattern was evolving. Dougherty wasn't just robbing anymore, he was escalating, shifting from surgical precision to theatrical menace. The kind of threat that didn't just steal cash, it stole time, nerves, and sleep. It happened in Reno, Nevada. A quiet bank, nestled among strip malls and morning commuters, became the next stop in Dougherty's private war. But this time, he brought something new to the table: terror. The night before the heist, just like before, a bank employee and his family were taken hostage. Calm demands, clear instructions. No chaos, just quiet domination. But when morning came, the rules changed. Dougherty chained the employee to what appeared to be an explosive device. His voice was low, deliberate. "Follow instructions, or the bomb goes off." That changed everything. This wasn't just a robbery. It was psychological warfare. The employee walked into the bank like a ghost, pale, trembling, every breath carrying the weight of his family's survival and the fear that his next move might end them all. The alarm was silent, but the panic was loud. The bomb squad arrived. FBI field agents closed the perimeter with clinical urgency. Each step was measured, every movement calculated. The technician approached the device like he was stepping into death's shadow. He knelt, examined, took a long breath, and then discovery. The bomb was fake, but the threat had been real. That was Dougherty's signature now. He didn't need to kill. He just needed you to believe he might. The Bureau wasn't fooled. They didn't see desperation. They saw calculation. Dougherty was playing a longer game, ramping up tension, provoking response, enjoying the panic his name alone could conjure. He wanted to be chased. He wanted headlines. He wanted the world to feel what he felt every day: pressure without escape. But the noose was tightening. A white sedan was spotted peeling away from the scene, fast, nervous, Washington plates. Agents followed the thread. The car led them to a used dealership where the seller recalled a man matching Dougherty's description. He hadn't come alone. He was with a young pregnant woman. Soft voice, nervous eyes, trying too hard to blend in. That was the first real crack in Dougherty's armor. He was no longer a lone phantom. He had someone to protect, someone to run with, someone he might make mistakes for. The FBI leaned in. If Dougherty was traveling with a partner, possibly expecting a child, his mobility, his freedom, his edge, they were all at risk. He wasn't just a predator anymore. He was a man with baggage, and baggage can be traced. The road out of Reno led through silence and snowfall. Dougherty was on the move again, but the Bureau was no longer trailing behind. They were closing in, and every mile he put between himself and his last heist was another thread in the net tightening around him. It was a minor car accident in Idaho that finally lit the match. The name on the police report didn't belong to anyone real, but the alias had shown up before, buried in one of Dougherty's paper trails. The FBI didn't waste a second. Agents rushed to the listed address, but like before, they were too late. Empty house, faint smell of gunpowder, spent casings in the yard. Neighbors confirmed a man matching Dougherty's profile had lived there. He fired guns in his backyard, often, loud, careless, and they added, his partner had just given birth. "A baby," one woman whispered, "about a week ago, then they were gone." That changed the stakes. Dougherty wasn't just running, he was nesting. And the FBI knew that even the most violent men can make mistakes when they're trying to protect a family. Using moving company logs, agents traced a rented truck in the girlfriend's name all the way to Colorado. Rural, wooded, off the grid. They found the cabin. For 2 days, FBI surveillance teams hid in the tree line, watching the property like hunters in the dark. Smoke from the chimney, shadows behind curtains, and then movement. Dougherty's girlfriend stepped outside. She wasn't alone. Another man accompanied her. They climbed into a truck and headed toward town. The FBI didn't make a move on the cabin. Not yet. They followed the truck. Quiet, invisible. In town, the two were taken without a sound. Back at the field office, the girlfriend didn't resist. She was tired, shaken. And when she finally spoke, her words confirmed everything. "He's in the cabin," she said, "and he has a gun." She said that was enough. The SWAT team moved like smoke at dawn. Silent, disciplined, coiled with tension. They surrounded the cabin as the sky began to lighten. Inside, Dougherty had no idea the world had come for him. Then he stepped outside, cradling a .357 Magnum in his right hand. He wasn't running. He wasn't shouting. He was just standing there. A quiet figure on a quiet porch, watching the trees. The lead agent whispered into the radio, "Hold. Wait for the right moment." Then came the call. The cabin phone rang. Dougherty answered. "Joe, this is the FBI. You're surrounded. There's nowhere left to go. Surrender peacefully." A long silence. Then a click. He hung up. The team didn't wait. A flashbang arced through the cabin window, detonating with a scream of light. SWAT moved in. "FBI, hands in the air, don't move!" Blinded, disoriented, and out of time, Dougherty didn't reach for the gun. He dropped to his knees. Within seconds, the man who had eluded the Bureau for years, who built a legacy on fear, strategy, and violence, was in handcuffs on his own porch. The baby inside was unharmed. The story ended where it began, in silence. Terry Connor and Joseph Dougherty were both sentenced to life in federal prison, plus 139 years. No parole, no mercy, No more shadows to hide in. The Bureau split them up, 2 separate maximum security facilities, 2 lifetimes apart. Their reign of terror was over, their partnership dismantled. And for the FBI, the case was more than just a win. It was proof that patience beats chaos, that even the darkest ghosts leave footprints, and that when the Bureau moves in silence, it moves to finish what it started.